Okay, my story is not about unsent letters. It's about an unmade phone call. And this is a story about the band The Gun Club, the leader of the band, Jeffrey Lee Pierce, a woman named Lana, and me. So The Gun Club was a great band in the early 80s. They were one of the best bands in Los Angeles. They had a kind of a following, and they're still kind of legendary today. And I liked them. I was pretty young at the time, so I didn't really get into them until I was living in London in 1986. I give away my age. Okay, so, and they played a gig there. It was so fantastic. It was one of these kind of shamanistic experiences where the band was totally on fire. It was in Astoria, which is an old Victorian theater. It's now been torn down in London. It was red velvet drapes. And before the show began, sold out show, Jeffrey Lee Pierce came, lead singer, and was hanging on the curtains, just looking at the audience before it started the show. You know, he was drunk as hell. And I thought, well, this is not going to end well. But I was wrong. He came out with the band and gave one of the most amazing concerts I've ever seen in my life. You know, it's this thing that stays with you. You're always going to remember this. Yeah, so the Gun Club, I saw them also a couple times after that, and then I was living in Stockholm, Sweden. They played there in 1991, and Jeffrey Lee was there, and we were in front. There was this woman, beautiful woman. She was Far East Asian woman, and she was dancing right in front of the stage where I was also. And I could just see by the way she moved that she really got the music, that she really loved it. After the show, I talked to the guitar player, Big Congo Powers, and then I was getting ready to go, putting on my, going to the coat check, and there was, I saw Jeffrey Lee standing there with talking to this woman that was dancing in front of me. And so I went and joined them at the table, three's company, and started talking to him and her, and then I realized, okay, they have their own thing going on. I'm just going to get my clothes, or get my coat and go away. So I was exiting the place. All of a sudden, the same woman was going out in front of the door ahead of me, and I thought, well, you only live once. So I went up to her, and I introduced myself and said, hey, how did you like the show? I loved it. She was walking along, and we had a little conversation about music, and then we decided we would go to a cafe and just talk more about music. We had things in common about that. And then the hour's getting late, and she has to go home. She's married. She has to go home to her husband. So I walk her to the bus stop and, say goodbye. And I ask for her phone number. This is where the phone number stuff comes that fits the theme of the story. So I asked for her phone number, and she gave it to me. And I left her at the bus stop. This was May. I know it because the birds were singing so loud in the air, and I was going home to my place. She was going on her way. Well, I never made that phone call. Never called her again. A year later, I saw her at a concert. She came in the door. She was on crutches. And I said, hey, Lena, do you remember me? She said, of course I do. I said, well, what happened to you? And she said, well, do you know when you left me off at the bus stop there a year ago after the Gun Club show? I said, sure. She said, 2 minutes later, a truck came in and wiped out the whole bus stop, taking her out, breaking both of her legs. And I was, what can you say to that? Like, oh my God. What if I'd waited there, a minute later? Could I pulled her away from it? Could I have saved her from this? Or would it have taken me out too? All these questions went through my mind, and I thought, oh my God. Well, Okay, I didn't see her again until the gun club came back to Stockholm in 1993. Now, by this time, 1993, their magic was fading and a new music was rising. So there wasn't that many people there in the concert, maybe 60 people. And of course, Lena came in and she said, hey, do you want to go back after the show? Do you want to go backstage with me? Well, Gun Club put on a really good show again. They never disappoint, or they never did me. And even though there was only 60 people in the audience, they still just fired it up. So after the show, she said, do you want to go backstage with me? I said, no, I don't. Why? I'm not invited. She said, well, you come with me. You're my guest. So we went backstage, and I spent most of the time talking to the rest of the band. Jeffrey Lee Pierce, he's very elusive figure, very mystical, distant figure, classic, eccentric artist. And he came through, and then finally we left the place, and Lena and Jeffrey Lee we walked along together, and they got into a taxi and went their own way, and I got into my walking shoes and went my own way. And later she told me that Jeffrey Lee Pierce all this time thought I was her husband. So that makes me think why he gave me such dirty looks on stage and everything all the time. So I don't know what happened to them, and I never. Oh yeah, well, let's finish the story with Jeffrey Lee. Okay, he died a few years after that. He was a drug abuser. He was an alcoholic. That's not to say, not to dissipate what the great art he did. Maybe he needed that fuel to do what he did, because it's going down in history. Last time I told this story, I had a song to play at the end of it by the Gun Club, but I don't have that now. But anyway, it was great. So, Jeffrey Lee, he died, and Lynn and I never contacted each other again. Oh, yeah, epilogue to the story. Okay, so I was in Tucson, Arizona a couple years ago, and Kid Congo Powers, which was also the guitarist for the Gun Club, also Nick Cave in the Bad Seeds, the Cramps, he's a legend in his own right. He was there, and he played. Well, he can't really do a whole show himself by his own. He's a great guitar player, but not a great singer. And afterwards, I met him, and he signed the new album. I told him the story that I've just told you now, and he wrote on the album cover. On the album cover, he signed, "Truth is stranger than friction, and stranger than fiction. Kid Congo Powers." So that's the end of the story.